Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about mindset, and it's one of my favorite new topics, and it's something that I wish I'd known when I was your age or when I was even younger, but didn't know. So there's a psychologist from Stanford University, and her name is Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K. And she started out working with children, and she noticed, she was working with junior high students, and she noticed that some of the students, when they faced a difficult task, would just give up. And then she noticed that some students, when they faced a difficult task, would persevere and find different ways to do things and actually loved the challenge of failure. And so she thought, why is it that some kids respond this way and some students respond this way? So that's kind of what launched her doctoral studies, and she developed this theory called fixed versus growth mindset. So that's what we're talking about today. This PowerPoint was provided by the Center for Confidence and Well-Being, and they got their information from the Scottish government. So I always want to give credit where credit is due. So we're talking about the psychology of learning and achievement, and what does your mindset have to do with how you learn and how you achieve? All right, so here's our agenda for the day. We're going to talk about the two different mindsets, fixed and growth. We're going to talk about the motivational framework that supports each of those. So how are we motivated? By outside forces or within ourselves intrinsically? How does praise affect us? Do we like praise when people praise us? Does that encourage us or does that discourage us? And then what's the brain got to do with mindset? And then how do we implement lasting change? And then we'll summarize it all. So, two mindsets. Are people born smart? Growing up, and I was an educator, and I thought you are born with an amount of intelligence, and it's fixed, and what you can accomplish. So if someone has 136 IQ, they can accomplish a lot more than someone with 100 IQ. I thought that was true until a few years ago. So let's look at some examples. Here's the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. When Winston was in grade school, he repeated a grade, which generally we think of as failure. Not only did he have to repeat a grade, he was in the lowest class, you know, the redbirds, the bluebirds, and the blackbirds. He was in the blackbirds, and he was in the lowest division of the lowest class. So in grade school, Winston was thought to not be very intelligent, yet he turned out to be this remarkable human being that changed the course of mankind. Beethoven's teacher told him, "You are a hopeless composer. You have no talent for writing music." But yet, 5 of his greatest symphonies he wrote after he was deaf. Leo Tolstoy dropped out of college. He was described as unable and unwilling to learn. So not only did they think he wasn't smart, they thought he was a behavior problem. Einstein's teacher called him academically subnormal. That's gotta hurt, huh? Teachers have to be careful what we say. Michael Jordan's coach said, "You are no more talented than any other basketball player." And Walt Disney was told, "You lack creative imagination." Thank goodness he didn't listen to them, huh? Or we would not be able to enjoy Disney now. People are made, not born. That's a completely different mindset than what I had anyway growing up. I thought you were born with a certain capability, and so you could achieve at that level of capability. But what Dr. Dweck discovered in all her studies is that absolutely is not true. So we have two mindsets. We have a mindset that says, this is the way my intelligence is. It is what it is. This other mindset says, no, my intelligence can grow and can develop. This person with a fixed mindset puts me in a box. This is who I am. This is all I'll ever be able to achieve. This person with the growth mindset says, I'm like a plant. Nurtured appropriately, I can grow and develop. Okay. The definition of mindset is that it is related to your belief about your ability. What do you believe you can do? It creates the mental world that you live in. And a fixed mindset says, I don't have the ability to change. It is what it is. Have you ever said, I can't do math, I can't draw. I've said that. But a growth mind says, I have the ability to change. I can grow. So when Dr. Carol Dweck was starting her studies, and she was, I believe she had her master's degree at that time, not her doctorate, she did a study of 6 children, and they were junior high students. Then later on, she did a study of college students, so coming right out of high school and going into college. And so she studied 2 different age groups. And she's studying them in these 5 areas. How do you set a goal? How do you get enjoyment out of learning? Are you persistent or not? How was your performance? And did they lie about the score? So these kids were given tests and told certain things about themselves, and these are the results. Students that were praised for the effort. So in other words, I really like how hard you worked on that. I can tell you spent a lot of time doing that. Those were the growth mindsets. The second column, those students were praised for their ability. Ooh, you must be really smart. You made 100 on this test. You must be a really good artist because look at how good you're painting it. So the first group was praised for their efforts, how hard they tried. The second group praised for their ability. You must be smart. You must be talented. You must be a good singer. Okay? The first group, 90% of that group made a learning goal. The second group, 66% of them made a performance goal. So a learning goal is, I want to learn all I can about how the digestive system works. A performance goal is, I want to make an A on this test. Okay, I'm going to be judged by my performance. The first one is I'm judged by my learning. The second one is I'm judged by some final outcome. The students that created a learning goal, I want to learn all I can about this, their enjoyment level continued and actually increased as they went through whatever it was they were working on. The fixed mindset group that were praised for ability, you must be smart, you must be talented, oh, you're so pretty. Their enjoyment level decreased. Because what if they said an A, I want to get an A, and they made a B+? Or what if they made an A 95%, but they wanted an A 100%? So their enjoyment level of what they were doing actually went down. It was just never good enough. Persistence. The group that was praised for effort, if they came to a roadblock, they said, oh, how else could I do this? What else could I do to try to get to the solution? When the ability group came to a roadblock, they stopped. Well, I only know one way to do it, and I don't know how else to do it. This is the only way I studied for this test. I studied for a multiple choice, and oh no, it's an essay. And so they just gave up. As far as their performance, the group that was praised for their effort, their performance actually improved. The group that was praised for being, oh, you must be smart, you must be pretty, their performance actually went down. And then she asked them, how'd you score on that? She gave them a test, how'd you score on that? The group that was praised for their effort, one person out of the group lied about their scores. The group that was praised for ability, you must be smart, and they were working to get a grade, not working to learn, 40% of those students lied about their scores. So what we know from this is if you praise someone for their ability, you must be smart, that's why you made an A. They feel pretty smart on that test, but next test, let's say you were talking about polynomials in class, but the next time you're talking about some other topic that you just don't get and you don't make an A, then you say, oh, I must not be smart. I thought I was smart, but I must not be smart because now I didn't make the A. Okay, so there's a motivational framework. How does motivation affect all of us behind the different kind of mindsets? So we're going to talk about 4 components: setting goals, how we respond, what does effort have to do with our mindset, and what are some strategies for changing our mindset. So the first one, we're going to talk about a goal. A goal is something we aim for in life. Could be, I want to score a soccer goal. It could be, I want to graduate with a 3.5. Could be, I want to be a contributing citizen of this world. But we all set goals. If we set a performance goal, that's, I want to make an A. I want to be the best. So I'm going to be judged based on how I perform on something. That's a fixed mindset. They believe that their potential can be measured. So my value is based on the grade that I'm going to make on that test. And I need validation from others. I need the teacher to tell me, oh, you're smart, you got an A. So I'm getting my motivation from outside sources. But if you get a low mark on that next chapter test, suddenly maybe I'm not smart. Successes and failures cause anxiety for students with a fixed mindset that set a performance goal, because success is never good enough. And anxiety is increased when you don't succeed or perform the way you thought you were going to perform. If you have a growth mindset and your goal is to learn, I'm going to learn everything I can about polynomials today. I may not know it all, but I'm going to learn everything I can. Then you go in with a learning goal, not a performance goal. You're trying for mastery and competence, so you want to understand this subject as much as you can, everything about it. Your motivation is now intrinsic. You're not waiting for a teacher to tell you that you did good, or an employer to say you're my top salesman. You set your own goals inside. So you reflect how you're doing right now, and you realize, but now is not the end. Maybe right now I only understood 80% of that, but I can continue working on it till I can get to a higher understanding. People that set goals for learning, not performance, have an increased performance, so they do better, they enjoy it more, and they have less negative emotion. Actually, this feeds into some theories on depression in college students. Okay, response. How do I respond to something? How do I react to it? Not like John McEnroe, hopefully. If you're a fixed mindset, you think I'm born with this much ability and this is all I can do, then it doesn't work out, then you have a whole sense of helplessness. When you're faced with failure or a challenge and you have this fixed mindset, you're not focused on trying to learn it. You're focused on trying to earn the grade. So you're not paying attention to the information itself. You study for the test, you make the A, you walk out the door and you forget it. And you've not actually learned anything except how to study for that test. Most people tend to become depressed, de-energized, and their self-esteem tends to go down because their value is tied to somebody saying, you did great. It denigrates their own intelligence. I'm just stupid. Last week I was smart because I made an A. This week I must be stupid because I didn't make the A. They also tend to underrepresent their past successes. So if someone says, you did great on that, and they're like, no, not really, it was okay, but, and then they overestimate their failures. I'm a loser, I'm fat, I'm ugly, stupid, nobody will ever love me, kind of thing. They become very pessimistic. So a fixed mindset leads to pessimism. And they explain the cause of events as something that's stable about them. So I'm not smart. I thought I was smart, but now I know I'm not smart because I didn't do well. If, however, your response is mastery, so you're trying to learn as much as you can learn, or shave some minutes off your running time, or lose a pound a week, not lose 30 pounds by this month, then you're going for mastery with a smaller goal. So you're starting to pay attention to learning the information so that next time I'm in this situation, I'll do better, whether it's taking a test, whether it's running a 5K, whether it's spending more time with your grandmother. You're going for mastery, not performance. They focus on what they're learning. Like, I want to learn everything about this subject that I can, not about how they feel about what they have learned. And they're willing to try new ways of doing things. So people with a growth mindset are what we tend to think of as problem solvers. In our office just now, we're working on this big report I was telling you about. We have a problem. Our 373 students multiplied to 510 students. Fixed mindset would say, I don't know what to do now. I knew what I was doing and now I don't know how to do. So they just give up, put it away and don't work on it. And we all do that sometimes. Growth mindset says, okay, let's look to see what category is it in, and let's call someone who can help us. So I get on the phone, call someone, they get on their little computer and it's fixed like in 3 minutes. Okay, that's a growth mindset. And they use self-motivating statements like, the harder it gets, the harder I'm gonna try. I'm not gonna let it, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That's a growth mindset. When faced with a task or a test that's impossible, they will factor in other reasons and not blame their intellect. So in other words, I made an A last week on that test, different topic. This week, I made a C. So instead of saying, well, I'm stupid. I thought I was smart, but no, I'm stupid. They find the other factors like, I probably didn't study. I didn't do the note cards. I mastered 70%. I know 70% of this information. You get your test back. It's really important to say, get the correct answers to what you missed, because you're learning for the sake of learning, not for the grade. Okay, now we're going to talk about effort. How much effort do we tend to put into these things? And is effort required for success? Do you have to put in effort to be successful? You know those people that everything seems to come really easy to them? That's just an image they're projecting, probably. Okay, effort. If you have a fixed mindset, you think that your effort is a reflection of low intelligence. So in other words, I tried, I was not successful, I'm not capable. Hard work doesn't mean I didn't get it or that I can still learn more. It means I'm stupid. And effort is really just a lack of ability. They think, it doesn't matter how I would have studied, I still would have made a D on this test. Back to the fixed mindset. Students that have a fixed mindset seem to believe one of two things. Either the teacher didn't like me and that's why I failed. They're always looking to put blame on some external source. Whereas people with a growth mindset say, what else could I do to get better at that? They try harder when faced with a setback, and then know effort leads to greater success. And so they use effort to overcome difficulty. Okay, so today I only did this much. Tomorrow I'm going to try harder. Tomorrow I will do this much more. And so they do it in incremental stages. People were asked about intelligence and asked, how much do you think this is worth due to your effort? And how much of this is due to your ability? So you made an 80 on this test. How much of that is because of the effort you put out? And how much of that is because you're just naturally smart? Okay? Intelligence equals what percent effort and what percent ability. People with a fixed mindset said, it's 65% my intelligence, and it's only 35% my effort that I put into it. So basically my outcomes are 2/3 determined by my innate intelligence, what I was born with, and 1/3 determined by how hard I'm working. But people with a growth mindset thought the other way. 1/3 of my success is determined by the innate ability I was born with, but 2/3 of that is determined by how hard I'm working to accomplish it. Effort concerning mindset. It's one thing to have brains and talents. So one person says, I don't need to put out any effort, things just come to me. That's the fixed mindset. I've got this natural ability, I can do this. But the other one says, but that doesn't give you success necessarily. That's the growth mindset. Okay, so how do we reach success? So here's some strategies on how to, because we've all caught ourselves being in a fixed mindset. I've heard myself say, I can't do science, or I can't draw. That's a big one that I say. Someone proved me wrong one time, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Strategies for a growth mindset. People who adopt a growth mindset generate other and new ways to do something. If one route doesn't work, they try another one. Think of Thomas Edison. I was reading in one of her books last night about people have this preconceived notion that Thomas Edison was this lonely little scientist working in his little experimental room by himself, day and night, struggling. He actually had a whole set of people, intelligent physicists, people working around him, helping him to discover, and had many failures before he actually created it. Okay, people with a growth mindset tend to think outside the box. This didn't work, what else can I try? Because they believe they can. If you hear yourself saying, I can't fill in the blank, you're operating from a fixed mindset. You think, I was born with this many brain cells, I was born with this much ability, So there are things I can do, and there are things I can't do. People with a growth mindset say, I was born with this much ability, but I know I have billions of nerves or brain cells that I'm not using. And I know that the first time I try something and the neurons make that connection, I'm not going to be an expert at it. But I know if I keep doing it repeatedly over and over, those neurons make more and more and more connections, and then I do become good at something. Strategies concerning fixed mindset. Carol Dweck found that these students with a fixed mindset, they did a problem wrong, they kept doing it wrong over and over and over. They could, I think that's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing the same way multiple times and getting the same results. So, but that's what a fixed mindset does. It says, this is the only way I know how to do this. I can't think of any other way. I'm not going to seek out any help. I just can't do it. So they disengage. They give up. And we've all been there and done that. Sometimes I do that, and it's called learned helplessness, like I don't want to change my tires, so it's like, I don't know how to do that, so my husband does it. Okay, praise. How does praise impact us? People are very sensitive to the messages that they receive about themselves. And as future parents, or future employees, or family members, we got to be really careful how we're giving praise to the people that matter to us. The way we interact with people either determines if we're fostering a growth mindset in them, or if we're fostering a fixed mindset in them. We need to make sure that we're praising for effort, not for ability. So with my grandsons, I'm very careful to say, boy, you worked really hard on that, or I like how hard you tried in baseball tonight. If I say, you're an awesome baseball player, you hit a home run, but then the next 10 games they don't hit home runs, then, oh, I'm not an awesome baseball player anymore. But if you're praising, like, you went out there and you tried so hard, you made every catch the best you could do. Okay, so praising children's intelligences put them in a fixed mindset. Wish I'd known this when I was a mom and my kids were little. Praise gives confidence and helps achievement. Fabulous, you're going to be the next Monet. The child says, I'm always going to need that person praising me, telling me that. So praising for ability, talent, or intelligence. We can change a young person's mindset from growth to fixed. Think about little kids. They're just willing to try anything, right? They don't know the word can't. My little 3-year-old grandson, there's nothing he won't try to do. You know, we were circling toys in a catalog last night. That's one of our things we do. And you know, are his circles very good? No, because he's 3 and he's just learning to hold a pen and a pencil. But it was like, I like how you really tried. I like how you made your points touch. Not like, you are the best circler in the world. Because then if he gets to school and he's bubbling a circle on the map test and he doesn't bubble it right, then it's like, oh, I'm not the best circler in the world. Encourages young people to create a performance goal and displays a helpless response when faced with challenges. Have y'all ever said, I just can't do that? I can't. I mean, I've done that. I'm trying to not let that word be in my vocabulary anymore. And it encourages people to lie. Because when you go home and you tell your mom, I made an A on that test, and mom is praising you, you're so smart, you're just like me, blah, blah, blah. And the next time they make a C, they probably don't want to come home and tell mom, oh, I made a C on that test, or I made a D on that test. It also undermines their motivation level and their willingness to take a risk. So then we become scared to try outside of our box. We want to stay where it's really, really safe. But if we praise the effort that leads to that success, then it's not about the big bang in the end. It's not about making the A on the test. It's learning everything you could about biorhythms, so when you're out in the job market, you know how to apply that knowledge. Not, I learned it to make an A on the test and then I forgot it all. So some examples. Well done constructing this. Not, you're the best scientist in the world, but good job constructing this. And so it empowers the child to say, now it's up to me to light this, put the torch on the rocket for it to go off. So when we praise for effort, it encourages people to get a growth mindset. It encourages them to create learning goals, not performance. It's not that I want to make an A. It's not that I have to be #1 in the marathon. It's that I want to do better than my last time. It's that I want to learn everything I can about this subject so I can help others. And then they have a mastery response when they face a setback. So I didn't shave time off of my race this time. I'll keep exercising, I'll keep doing all the right things and try to get a personal best next time. It also increases my own motivation and success when I say I'm trying for an overall performance, not an overall mastery. Or for growth, not performance. Praise is not a villain. So and the pendulum has swung like, oh, you should praise your children for everything too. You shouldn't praise your children because then they're dependent on that external motivation, not internal motivation. Praise is not a bad thing. It can be a good thing as long as it's the right kind of praise. So instead of saying, I love your picture, you're the best artist in the world, because he's going to go to school and there's going to be a better artist. She says, well, tell me about the colors that you chose to use. So you're encouraging growth in your children or whomever you're working with, and they feel like it's good to feel encouraged and appreciated. And feedback is very important. How many of you hated when you had a teacher that you took a test and it was 6 weeks later and you still didn't have the test back? So you learn how you did. Or they told you a score, you got a 78. But what did I not learn? I need to know what I didn't learn so I can make sure I learn that before I move on. Constructive criticism is necessary if we want people to develop and learn. So I can't just say, well, you got a 93 and you got a 60 and you got a 45 and you got an 82 and be done. Because you're not learning anything else, right? You need that feedback. Praise is not the villain. Make sure that you're praising for the effort so that the person becomes resilient and motivated. Okay, then one of the last things we want to talk about is the brain. What does the brain have to do with our mindset? So at Stanford Carroll, actually, they've done brain scans of people with a fixed mindset, and they've done brain scans of people with a growth mindset, and there's a huge difference in the mass amounts of the brain, how they use their brain. There's even a big difference in the areas of the brain and how they're developed. So we'll go into that in a little bit. So basically, 4 lobes of the brain. Frontal lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, and occipital lobe. And this is what each one of them kind of control. So your frontal lobe up here, parietal lobe back here, temporal lobe, and occipital. And you can kind of guess what those go with by looking at the terms. So the frontal lobe up here, this is your thinking area. And what we now know is that your frontal lobe does not fully develop till you're about 25 or 26. That's why when you're 18, you do really stupid things and you think you're going to live forever and you take chances. Oh Lord, the things I did at 18, oh my goodness, I'd have a fit if my children did those things. But that's the thinking center of your brain right up here. We also know, sorry, but in guys it develops later than it does in girls. Okay, so frontal lobe is where you can process stuff and put things together. Okay, this is your feeling lobe of your brain. Touching, emotions, okay. Occipital, eyes. This is the seeing part of your brain, how you visually take information in and process it. Temporal lobe, back here, think more of hearing. Are you more of a person who takes information in auditorily? My temporal lobe is very underdeveloped. I could develop it though. Okay, the body and the brain. Here's what we now know. Homunculus is used to describe the amount of space that our body parts occupy in our brain. So, if I'm an accountant and I sit at a computer all day and I number crunch, I'm using that frontal lobe of my brain. If I'm an Olympian, pole vaulter, and I'm using my leg muscles and my spine and my body, then my body part of my brain is going to take up more space in my brain. So I'll show you part of this. In a model of motor functions, some parts are bigger because they get used more, or they're used more accurately. All right, so looking at this picture of the brain, there's the foot, the hip, the trunk, the arm, the hand, the face, the tongue, the larynx. So think about your own life. What muscles in your body do you use more than others? How many of you exercise regularly? I don't. But those of you that do, you're using different part of muscles. How many of you listen to music all the time? Yeah, I know some of you do. I do. So the music part of my brain, the hearing part and that part, but music is also related to math because there's beats, numbers, yeah. So the part of your body that you're using the most increases that part of your brain. The more we use the part of our body, the more space it's going to take up in our brain to control and interpret how we're using our body. Thus, that part of your body gets better because you're using it more neurons. By learning, in fact, by learning, the brain may have to change the space it uses to account for new abilities. Here's a great example. So I retired from the public school system and we used Mac computers. And coming out here, everything is PC, and I was just terrified, like, I don't know how to use a PC, and I was so scared. I had to use a different part of my brain, right? Because shortcuts and a right click, I'm like, why do you need a right click? But I have developed a new part of my brain that I wasn't using before because I had to. People who play music have been found to have an auditory center bigger than normal. So the more you listen to music, the part of your brain gets bigger, the more you listen to the music. It's kind of self-fulfilling. The sound area of their brain got bigger because they were practicing. The more they listened to music, the bigger the brain got, and the more they listened to hear. So here's the evidence that neuroscience is presenting us. Rats that live in a rich environment, their environment is enriched, have a heavier brain. Their brain is 10% heavier than those that lived in a boring environment. They didn't have any stimulus. Do you guys think your brain is more enriched and more heavier than people your age that aren't coming to school? That they go to a job and maybe they do the same job every day, day after day after day after day? Don't you think your brains are developing more in different areas because you're taking in all this new information? Taxi drivers, they have to know the location. They have to know the shortcuts to get to places. They have to know landmarks. So brain scans of taxi drivers show the area in your brain that deals with 3D space is much increased. That's the hippocampus is much larger in a taxi driver than in a non-taxi driver. Musicians have a larger auditory cortex. So here's the brain. So all areas of the brain, like sound, communication, problem solving, are made of these little cells called neurons. And we have billions of neurons in our brain. And they transmit information all the way around. Think back to when you were learning to ride a bike. You can probably remember that. I started saying when you first learned to walk, you probably remember that. But think back to when you're learning to ride a bike, when you were maybe 5 or 6 or 4 or 3. The neurons connect to each other through these little covered things called synapses. So the first time you tried to even get on the bike, 2 neurons made a connection and you probably fell off. But you got back up and you tried to get on again, and another pair of neurons made connections through synapses. And the more you tried that, the better you got at it. Then think about pedaling, learning that you got to put pressure on that pedal to move it forward. Your brain had to learn how to do that. So you've got billions of nerve cells in your brain, and what we know is we don't use hardly any of those nerve cells, maybe a third of what we have. If we really used our brain, think of what we could actually accomplish. Learning helps those neurons to grow. So the more you're exposed to something, the more neurons make connections, the more you learn about it, the more you grow. So whether it's in math, the first time you tried to play a musical instrument, when you were learning to read, I was reading with one of my grandsons the other night, and I'm thinking, oh, he's really showing good improvement on his reading. But see, you have just a few synapses making connections with the neurons on the left, but then you get this electrical storm going over on the right because now there's so many more connections. Let me back up to this one just a minute. Good, just a little freebie thrown in here. So studying something new. So you're in biology or government or whatever class you're in. In order to learn it the best you can, you don't wait and cram the night before. Before you go to class, read the information, because what you're doing is you're making these neurons make connections to what you already knew about biology in high school and what you know just from being a human being. You go to class, you hear the professor talk, you ask questions, you hear other students talk. more neurons are now connecting because you hear someone say something like, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. More neurons are connecting. When you leave class that night, reread your notes. So now you've had 3 opportunities to be exposed to this information. Within 24 hours, reread them again, recopy your notes, make note cards, do something with that information within 24 hours. Then you don't have to look at it again except once a week between now and final. And research says you'll probably make at least a B. Why is that? Because the neurons are making more and more and more connections. So cramming is a horrible study habit because your brain is under fright or trauma right then because you're starting to panic, oh, this test is tomorrow and I haven't studied. But if you've been reading it over time, the neuron has made the connections, it's now getting into your long-term memory. Little freebie. Okay, people with large auditory areas in their brain, they grew lots more neuron connections in sound through lots and lots of practice. Are any of you in band or play a musical instrument or orchestra or anything like that? You know, as a elementary principal, our kids took violin and squawk, 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 you know. But then 2 years later, you go to their 6th grade concert and it's like, oh my gosh, these kids are good. And then you hear them in high school and they're professional. But it's because of the neuron and the brain activity that was going on. All right, final proof. Babies aren't stupid. We all grew up. We all are very intelligent. But when you're a little, you know, you just kind of laid there. But we know that babies are learning and growing more rapidly than we are now at our age, especially my age and you guys' age, because their brain is making so many new connections. It says that every green dot is a junction between one nerve and another. So that's a neuron making the connection through the synapse. How do we implement lasting change? So maybe you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a fixed mindset person. I can't do math, I can't do whatever it is I cannot do. I say that all the time, I can't run. The reality is I could run if I would start walking and practicing.